Hello, welcome in to NASCAR Inside the Race, the post-Mexico City edition. Still in Mexico City, actually. Traveled down here for the first ever international race. Well, not the first ever, but the first international points-paying race for the Cup Series since I think it was 1958. So it has been a while. Got to see the track for the first time myself. The track's amazing. Got to watch SVG do what SVG does, which is learn a new road course faster than everyone else and stretch off to nearly a record-breaking lead. Biggest win we've seen, margin of victory-wise since Texas 09. Biggest margin of victory on a road course since Riverside 79. So a dominant performance when he needed it. But there was a lot to the race. We started in the rain. We already saw Kyle Busch kind of have a pinball wreck down into turn one. Then we saw Ty Gibbs and SVG go in a great battle until a mid-race yellow kind of flipped the strategy that handed the control of the race to SVG. And then the closing laps, we saw the Mr. Excitement, Carson Hocevar, cut into Ricky Stenhouse Jr. again. And then some words after the race. So a lot to break down. And for that, I'm going to bring in a couple friends, a couple colleagues. I got my man Kyle Petty, who's going to join me to break down everything road course racing. KP, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And I got the mayor, Jeff Burton, who was in Mexico with me, but he left a day early. He was giving me the travel, I'll give it footnotes for how I was expected to travel home. So I'm really looking forward to that later this morning, Jeff.
Yeah, it's good to be home, but it was good to be there. It was a good experience. Racetrack, I thought was awesome. It was, the racetrack and NASCAR did a great job working together. And the race itself, both races were really good races. I mean, SVG kind of ran away with it, but there was really good action on the racetrack both days.
Yeah, normally we would start with the winner, but I think we need to start with the event. KP, you've been around NASCAR as long as anyone I know. You've seen it all. First, what was your opinion when you heard we were racing in Mexico City? And to see it play out, how did the weekend look from your vantage point?
So after watching the Xfinity races there in the past, you knew it was possible. You knew they could go here and run these cars. So when you heard they're going to Mexico, I'm like, what an incredible idea, honestly. When we look at what America is becoming, when we look at the amount of people that have come across the border and live in the United States now, it's almost one big area now as you look at it. So, but for our sport, a sport that was born in the Southeast, a sport that just, in a lot of people's minds, recently began to take over the United States, to go to Mexico was a big deal. But watching on TV, watching Amazon, watching everything that you guys put up, watching everything on NASCAR, watching all this stuff, I was fascinated the way the fans embrace the sport. Our race car drivers, the NASCAR drivers, were rock stars. They were rock stars. They couldn't walk across the paddock. They couldn't walk anywhere without being mobbed. That's the way it should be. That's the way. These are stars. Kyle Larson is a star. You know what I mean? When I look at it, Kyle Busch is a star. Denny Hamlin is a star. All these guys are superstars. Sometimes we forget that when we see them so often. But to see this new country and to see this new place embrace these guys, my gosh, man, it rejuvenated me. I was pumped up when the race come. I'm thinking, we're getting ready to see something here, man. We're seeing a bunch of rock stars, superstars go at it. So I think it's a huge step for the sport. Huge step for the sport, because it's the same thing we did at the LA Coliseum. It's the same thing that NASCAR did at Chicago. If you can't bring all the fans to your place, go to their place. Go where they are. And I think yesterday proved there's a ton of NASCAR fans in Mexico City.
I will tell you, Jeff and I were both there for the Xfinity race. Jeff's son actually competed in it in the stadium section. So I watched Xfinity race with Dale Jr. over in the prime booth. And when Daniel Suarez took the lead and went through the stadium section, it was deafening. I mean, it truly was deafening. It was a level of cheering and support that I don't think we've ever seen one driver ever get. I mean, he had basically the entire nation riding along with him. But Jeff, that is a fan base. You want to talk about an excited fan base. When Suarez won that race, the place was nearly out of control.
No, it was wild. Somehow or another, I ended up spotting the Xfinity race from the stadium section. And by the way, I should never spot, but there was no one else there, so I had to. So, I'm sitting there, and you fans have seen spotters. They have the big headsets on, and that's for noise, so you can hear, and it blocks out all the noise. Well, those people, those fans on the last lap, and he wasn't even in the stadium section yet, I could hear them over my headset. I could hear them screaming. I mean, the excitement from them was so much fun, and it was so cool. But even before he won, pre-race, when stuff would happen over there, the fans were really excited. They really had a good time in pre-race. The music was pumping. There was a lot of energy. It was a really cool environment. I'm really glad actually that I went over there. I watched some practice from over there. Steve, you came and sat down with me, and we watched practice from the stadium section. That really was fun, because now you have this little area. I mean, how long were they in that section, Steve? Maybe 8 seconds or so?
Yeah, not long.
But when they would come through there, you literally had this stadium environment where the grandstands were on both sides of the racetrack, and then the cars would go through the grandstands, like underneath the grandstands in between them. And that was a really, really cool experience. And to be sitting right there with the fans and the energy, that's something I'll never forget. That noise on that last lap it really was fun.
Tom, that's a great comment, because I agree. SVG is unlike any other in the 77. Don't worry. We're going to get to the Stenhouse Hocevar. I'm going to call it round 2 and then expected round 3. So I think it's going to be a lot to talk about. So I thought Dale Jr. kind of had this broken down for me. He said he thought SVG's advantage was back because the track was new. So let's recap, right? SVG shows up in Chicago a couple of years ago. Street course, very unknown for most of the Cup drivers, and he really just shows that he is unreal, right? I mean, he just has more pace. He passes in areas, Kyle, that I don't think any of us thought were passing zones, right? He looked at the racetrack very differently. 2 things. One, I think the rest of the field proved that they're very good road course racers. I mean, Chris Buescher beat SVG at Watkins Glen. So I don't want to take anything away from the Cup guys that have been around, but guess what? SVG's now a Cup regular. He's full time, and I do think that helps him. I think he's in this car all the time now, so it's not totally foreign to him. All the adjustments, all the little things. He's learning the ovals. I applaud that he's learning the ovals. Like I really love what he's doing in the sport. But Dale mentioned we came to a new track, so he would learn it the quickest, and I think that's what we watched, right? I think we watched a guy that meticulously kind of picked this racetrack apart, and he admitted that he thought he had some great competition with Ty Gibbs, but then the way the strategy fell when Ty Gibbs ran long and got caught by the yellow. Once the lead was handed to the 88, man, he was just out there cruising. I mean, off to a 16 and a half second win. Really never put a car in the wrong position.
KP?
Yeah. No, so, yeah, and I'll speak to that. And I think Dale Jr. has a great point. I think he has a great point where he's coming to a new track. And I say that I think you have to look at his total experience. And what I mean by that is he came from supercar racing. And you look at the amount of different racetracks they ran. That was a road course series. The Cup guys run Sonoma and Watkins Glen. That's it. You hit it a couple of times a year. Yes, we've thrown in Road America. Yes, we've thrown in some different courses at the Roval, and we've thrown in some different things. But basically, we race 3 or 4 times, or Cup guys race 3 or 4 times, where he ran an entire series. So his book on road courses is a lot greater. He looks at a section of this racetrack and he goes, oh my gosh, that's like this racetrack I run. Oh my gosh, this is like another racetrack that I used to run. The Cup guys, Chris Buescher, Christopher Bale, those guys, they don't have that. I'm going to throw in a name here, Connor Zilich. He has that same advantage in the Xfinity series because he ran so many road courses. When he jumped in the Cup or in the Xfinity cars, yeah, he's going to kick your butt 6 ways from Sunday a lot of times because his book on road course racing is so much greater. That's his forte. This is SVG's forte. If we go to these places, and especially the new places, he's going to show up 100%, where Christopher Bale shows up 80%, then has to learn the racetrack. And by race time, he's probably 97 or 98%, but he's not 100% like SVG. And that's not a knock on our guys. You go back 3 or 4 times, the Cup guys are going to go door to door. Just as you said, Chris Buescher beat him at Watkins Glen. He is beatable. But when we go to new tracks, it's tougher because he is just an incredible. He is so methodical about the way he does it. Watching Amazon yesterday, watching the broadcast yesterday, we heard Carl Edwards say when he was in the lead, he never put a wheel wrong. He was smooth. He was methodical. He never spun the tires. He never did anything. Now, when he was chasing when he was chasing Gibbs, he was a little bit over the top. He was sliding a little bit, trying to make something happen. But he understands the limits of the car. He understands that. And I think this car, along with what his ability this brand new car that we've had for the last 3 or 4 years or whatever really brought him to the game a lot faster.
It seems like, Jeff, to me, that as Kyle was saying, his comfort in this car is much higher because, his advantage at the street course was really, I thought, the course itself and the proximity to the walls and the things. But it looked like he just understood the tools available. With a lot's made about him using the clutch. He said in the post race that he didn't think the clutch was a big advantage. So for the fans at home, I'm going to nerd out for a minute. When a car starts to decelerate, when you lift off the gas, the rear tires go from acceleration to deceleration. They're braking. They're like longitudinally pulling the car back. They're slowing the car down. Like when you lift off and you hear the engine rev, that's because the rear tires are being turned by the car moving forward. So it's like adding rear brake. So very simply, we hear brake bias all the time. You can adjust it front to rear. Well, the other way you can adjust bias is if you push the clutch in, you reduce the rear braking force by quite a bit because you take away the engine force. That can happen when you're on the brakes. It can actually even happen in corners where you're just decelerating off the throttle, high-speed corners, not even where you're on the brake. It's almost like a valve, right? You push that clutch in as a valve, and it can secure the car up under braking. It can actually make the car turn if you let the valve out, right? And then you add this rear decel, and the car rotates. Not to get all into the details, V8 Supercar, the way their rear transmission works or where the rear differential works, it's a required skill set. You can't keep up without it. On our post-race show, SVG said it was a big advantage in the Xfinity car because of wheel hop and the 4-speed transmission. He claims it's not as big advantage in the current next-gen car. Now, to be clear, if it was a huge advantage, I would claim it's not an advantage as well because I wouldn't want anybody to blame, like, no, don't look here. No, don't look here. No, it's not working. He just looks comfortable, I think, is my point in this car, right? He's not learning a new car. He was only having to learn a new racetrack, and he learned very quickly.
Yeah, and look, I think it's important. You mentioned Xfinity Series. I mean, he was in 6 Xfinity road course races. He won 3. And a lot of people say, well, he's not racing against the same talent. Well, if you really think about the Xfinity Series a couple of years ago was running more road course races than the Cup Series were. So you had a lot of guys that actually had more experience. And he was racing against Ty Gibbs. He was racing against a lot of guys that were really AJ Allmendinger. He was beating AJ Allmendinger from the same shop on, regular. So, he has a natural skill set that has been honed over the years of his road course racing. The clutch conversation, I think there is probably a little bit of an advantage there, but this isn't a new conversation. I mean, it's come to light, but for years we would ask and talk about why could road course racers drive the same car and have more braking speed, have the ability to get into a corner deeper. And when you would talk to some of the road course guys that were from other series, they wouldn't tell you how or what, but there were some guys that were using the clutch back then. So this isn't a totally new conversation. He has brought it to he has brought it because in my eyes, everybody's like, what's the magic? And as most things in life, typically there's not one thing that makes everything work or one thing that makes everything not work. It's a series of things. So the clutch, him using the clutch probably is a small advantage in some areas, and in others it doesn't. I have talked to countless Cup drivers that have worked and worked and worked and worked in the sim. You don't get any testing time anymore. So you can't go to the racetrack and try to work this thing out. So I have talked to countless amount of them, and no one's figured out like how to do it or why they think it would be an advantage with the next gen car. So a lot of controversy, but I can assure you that they are continuing to work on it because if you can gain 0.2 of a second on a lap, that's massive. How much money would you spend on that, Steve? And how much time would you spend on building a car 0.2 of a second faster? So if a good driver can find it. And the other thing I want to say about SVG is I heard Junior say this on the broadcast, and I completely agree. I have watched SVG in these races, and I don't think he's showing everybody what he has in many cases. I think he's riding. I think that he's and I think he's complaining on the radio in times it's needed, so the other people are hearing it. But when they ask him about it, hey, we're going to try this. Yeah, no problem. His car, I just don't think he's showing anybody, and that's really smart because if you have a Ty Gibbs or a Chris Buescher, whomever it is, if you're on the radio saying, yeah, man, I got it, we're good. Well, their crew chiefs are hearing that. And now they know, okay, I got to make my car better. And so I don't think that he's showing everybody everything until he has to. And by the way, that's not new either. We've seen that in.
I was going to say, I feel like that was like that's like a little, 80s, 90s, 2000s NASCAR.
Yes.
I can think of a lot of guys that, man, you're having a good run until the pay window opened. Then all of a sudden that Rusty and Mark and Burton and Dale Sr. all just got faster. I'm like, no,
everybody picked up 0.3 of a second. Where'd that come from?
Yeah. So I want to add this on the clutch thing. And Jeff's right. It's been around forever. Listen, I took a motorcycle class from Ricky Carmichael, a motocross truck class. And the point was, and my point is, he would say when you get into a tight corner, as you would run over the moguls and get into a tight corner and you had to really hairpin it around the corner, pull the clutch in, break the bike, and it broke, and it would break so much better, so much straighter, so much smoother, and then release the clutch and accelerate at the same time. And it was fascinating. It was because I would have never thought about doing that in a car. I never did that in a car, but I would have never thought about it in a car until it's come up recently. The other thing I'm going to say is this. He has a style of driving, and we saw it with his foot cam before. He still heels and toes. Which means he rolls his right foot. He'll brake with his right foot and roll his foot onto the accelerator. He learned to drive that way. He can't drive any other way. That's his timing. That's where he's at. And we heard him complain yesterday when his crew chief said, slow down. And he's like, stop telling me to slow down. He was in that rhythm. He knew what he needed to do. And that's where a driver gets in a car. Jeff knows this. You get it in your head, and you don't want to hear somebody tell you to slow down. You don't want to hear somebody tell you to speed up. You're doing everything you can, but it's all within your ability and all within the ability of what the car is giving you back. So I don't think we're ever going to see Kyle Busch use a clutch. I don't think we're ever going to see, Brad Kay or Denny Hamlin use a clutch. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. Sorry. Some of these young guys may be able to try it and may be able to learn it, but Jeff has a great point. How are you going to learn it on a simulator? How are you going to learn it in a place where you don't really feel it the way you feel it on a racetrack? And it's going to be a lot tougher. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that as technology advances, it becomes a lost art. And I think he's a throwback. He's that bridge between what older drivers were, the way he learned, and what drivers drive like today.
Well, I have a lot more. I want to talk about some good runs and racing in the rain, but we're going to jump right to what everybody's going to be talking about, and that's Mr. Excitement, Carson Hocevar, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So if we take the fan back at Nashville, kind of a racing accident, we'll figure what's going on. Hocevar definitely got in the back of the 47. Then we fast forward. This is Nashville right here, right? 77 gets back in the 47. Racing wreck, kind of story as old as time. This is a debate we're always going to have. Without a doubt, Hocevar wrecked the 47 at Nashville. Then we go to this week in Mexico City, and the 47 gets spun off the front bumper of the 77 in the stadium section. Now, the difference for me is crystal clear. Hocevar is not even racing for anything here, right? I think at this point he might even be a lap down. Like, he was having not the best day, which everybody, it happens to people. Spins, of all people, the 47 out a second time. Then post-race, Ricky goes over and has a conversation in the window of the 77. I think we might have that clip as well. And he has some pretty specific words. Oh, man. Look, I'm with Ricky. I understand the frustration. I get it. So he goes over there and he basically tells him, you hit me, you're a lap down. I think he lays the facts out. He could be a pretty good prosecutor, because I felt like he laid the facts out pretty good. You ran me over. You were lap down. And you even heard Hocevar be like, yeah, I messed up. I know. Look, I'm kind of overhearing the, hey, man, I knows. Now, look, I just want to put a little asterisk here. That what Hocevar has done, you guys have both wrecked people, been wrecked. I mean, what these guys do, we look at in a magnifying glass. That's our job. They're professional athletes. We're going to examine it that way. And in that lens, Hocevar has opened a can of worms I don't think he's going to want to open. Nashville was bad enough, and I just think everything he might have said after Nashville doesn't land with me anymore after Mexico City. That's the point, right? He said some of the right things after Nashville, but then he wrecks them again at Mexico City. And I believe that Ricky Stenhouse is a man of his word. I don't believe this is done. I think there's round 2 of perhaps round 3, right? I think Ricky Stenhouse has had enough with Hocevar. And unfortunately for Carson, I think the whole garage is seeing this play out. And this does have a detrimental effect on his relationship with many other drivers, because if he's willing to do it to Ricky, why wouldn't he do it to you? KP, I know there's some highlights. I'm not going to dig them all back up of some punches thrown and some fights. So you have seen it all from your dad to your career.
Yeah.
Let me have it. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So look, I did look at I look at these things almost two separate incidents. And I say it this, it just happened to be the same two guys. And Jeff knows this, and you know this, Steve, being around. Sometimes the planets all line up and you are just a magnet to this guy. And these right now, they're just in the same magnetic world. They are just connected in some strange way. But I looked at what happened at Nashville and I thought, you know what, that's just racing. I'm going to chalk that up to a little bit of a racing incident. Carson was a little bit of aggressive. We saw and when you watch the footage, that Stenhouse he's in a lane and in two lanes at the same time. So just mark it up as racing. This one I'm going to mark up to straight stupidity, okay, on Carson's part. This should have never happened. He should have never been close to Ricky Stenhouse. He should have never put himself in that position. He was out of the race. He was having a bad day. Don't make it worse. And he made it worse. So when you look at it, you have to look and say, think, Carson, think. Sometimes when you're behind the wheel and you're hanging onto the steering wheel, it's not about bravery. It's not about courage. It's not about, sacking up and getting something done. It's about thinking a little bit. And he put himself in this position. And he may go the rest of his career and never get within 15 feet of Ricky Stenhouse on the racetrack. He may learn from this, but this one was totally uncalled for. And Ricky had every right to go over to the window, to go over to his window, snatch his window net down, pull him out through it, and just beat him to a pulp right there on the side of the racetrack. Because this one, when somebody does something stupid, it makes you even madder than when they do it intentionally.
Yeah, look, here's what I would say. I would say that Carson Hocevar did not intentionally wreck Ricky Stenhouse this weekend. The problem is Carson needs to recognize that he cannot wreck Ricky Stenhouse this weekend. You have to purposely not wreck Ricky Stenhouse when you're a lap down. And that's the decision-making that Carson has to move forward with. And I'm sorry, one of you just said that the entire garage is starting to get frustrated. And this is a moment where Carson has a decision to make. And he's had many, many moments that he has a decision he has to make. So far, his decision has been, I'm going to be me. We all need to be better as people, as whatever it is we do. And these are the moments that you can't just say to whomever, I'm going to be better, I won't do it again. You have to mean it, and you have to work at it. And that's a wreck that should have never happened.
Yeah.
And you cannot be a lap down. Look, I understand there's a situation where you're lap down and you're racing for the lucky dog and you're trying to get yourself, but that wasn't the case here. As far as I know, it wasn't the case here. Yeah. Maybe it was, but I don't believe it was. And in those cases, you have to stay aggressive because your race could depend on being on that lead lap. But you can't get into a situation, continue to get in situations and continue to apologize. At some point, you got to fix it. And we've seen it happen. We're watching it right now with many drivers in the series, Ty Gibbs being one of them. We talked about him a lot. He caused lots of issues in the Xfinity Series. He hasn't done that in Cup. He came in, he recognized it, calmed it down. Ross Chastain recognized it, calmed it down. Ernie Irvin recognized it, calmed it down. There's a lot of people that, and I believe Carson will as well, but it needs to happen, right? It needs to happen because at some point it is going to, I don't buy into this. They're going to start wrecking you and they're not going to let you be. Show me examples. There's not that many examples where drivers have done that, but it is going to start affecting their ability to be successful as a race team because eventually it becomes a distraction. Eventually it starts you having to focus on that rather than being a better race car driver and building a better race team. And it will become a problem. And Carson he's capable. He's capable of fixing this. It's not like he can't fix it. He just has to. And that things like happened today or yesterday are going to happen in your career. I've wrecked people, but the timing of that is you really have to recognize that your situation and the other people around you situation and be part of this community while being selfish at the same time. And Carson just hasn't figured that out yet. And I think he will, but he needs to do it quickly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I saw Ricky Stenhouse before the race. We had this conversation about Hocevar, and it seemed clear to me that it wasn't really over to him, I think, heading into the race. So it's for sure not over now, where there was more in the race. Where should we go? We got a lot to talk about. Larson fastest lap. Get on my soapbox and tell you that this I don't hate the players. I hate the game. I think this is a perfect example of why this rule needed to have a little bit of adjustment. He gets in a wreck early. They go to the garage. A+ work by Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson. I don't blame them at all. You want to talk about why this team's so dangerous? This is why. Because they're crazy fast and because they never, ever give up. They go in, they fix this car, they come back out, they make basically single car runs and clean racetrack to run the fastest lap, 39 laps down to score the extra point. Anybody who wants to eye roll the extra point, let me remind you, he lost the regular season championship by 1 point was the difference between Kyle Larson being the regular season champion or not last year. You wonder what those 5 points would have looked like for the last round of the playoffs, right? Like these dominoes can fall very, very quickly. So that's why I love the effort of the 5 car. I just don't love the game they're playing. I wish there'd be an adjustment maybe to this one to make it like a lead lap thing, right? I'm fine. I love Xfinity as a partner, and I love they're celebrating speed, right? They're all about speed, but I think the speed needs to be in the context of the race. But hey, good job with the 5 of Kyle Larson. They did it. How about rain racing, guys? I'm going to tell you, I struggle down here to predict this weather. We're 7,300 feet. Elevation is crazy. We're in between these mountains. And like, you know how it is, KP, you and I go to enough races like Bristol, the rain will come over the mountains like, oh, it's never going to get here. And we know, I have no idea about the weather patterns down here. All I know is about every day around 4 o'clock, it has seemed to rain every day I'm here. And we got some rain to start this race. I thought visibility was good. And poor Kyle Busch, I think he said, hey, man, I hit the brakes and I was on ice and had this big cannonball wreck into turn 1. It was unfortunate for those involved, but I thought racing allowed this international fan base to not sit through a delay. We saw cars on the racetrack. Yeah,
look, I like rain racing. I really do. I've enjoyed the times that we've watched the Cup cars do it. I'm gonna go back and say that it's only fitting that Mexico City and Pocono should go back to back because you cannot predict the weather at either one of those places. Never know what the weather is going to be. But here's the thing. I think we're back to just as we spoke about SVG earlier. He knows how to race in the rain. Okay, when you only race in the rain once every 2 or 3 years or twice every year or whatever, you're not as proficient at it. You're not it's not something that is just muscle memory. You almost have to relearn every time you get in a car. And you know, you have to relearn that, okay, the brakes are a little bit wet. They're a little bit hot. They cool a little bit quicker because they've got water on them. I've got to go to them a little bit different. I've got to do this. I've got to stay offline. I got to get online. I got to stay off the paint. Where do I go here? What do I do there? There's so many different things. And you're doing that at the same time, you're trying to keep 6 guys behind you and trying to pass the 2 guys in front of you. You're trying to learn it. So I think we saw a great example yesterday of someone with a ton of race or rain experience, meaning Austin Cindric, who stayed out on slicks and did a phenomenal job starting on the front and only dropping so far in that first little stint of 4 or 5 laps or whatever it was. I was totally blown away with Austin Cindric yesterday and his car control on slick tires when everybody else was on wets. But that's his years of experience on wet weather tires and with a car in wet conditions. And I just don't think the Cup guys have that. It's a show and it's good for the fans, but I'm not always sure that it's good for the drivers. But I do applaud NASCAR and I applaud Goodyear for bringing a tire that allows us to do it, that allows Cup racing to run at these places, because it would have been horrendous without everything, all the hype, everything that had been put into the Mexico race, to the Mexico City race, to have to sit there for an extra day, to have to sit there for 5 or 6 hours and drive that racetrack. They did a great job yesterday.
I thought it was crazy. We have an international race with 2 international born drivers. We have Daniel Suarez winning on Saturday, and then the Kiwi, SVG winning on Sunday, and down the same international line. How about this? It was reported, and then he answered the questions after, that sitting in the hauler pre-race when they thought rain would come, SVG just grabbed his phone, Red Bull guy, and he starts texting Max Verstappen, who runs here in Formula One in the wet, and starts asking about offline and online. And 2 things. First of all, you just talked about his experience. I think the the world should know that's how competitive these guys are, that, hey, man, there's never enough information. But the second thing is, he's not texting, Bob Nobody, who's driven. He's like, I'm going to text Max. My buddy Max Verstappen, he's pretty good at this driving thing. And that's how he got more of the characteristics of the racetrack. I mean, the cars are different, but the racetrack, what are the characteristics of this track in the wet?
Listen, and 90% of the other Cup drivers picked up the phone and called CarMax because to say, how do I drive in the rain? You know what I mean? They don't know anybody like that they can draw on. You know what I'm saying? And that is the point where that just brings it full circle again, that his breadth of the depth of his knowledge and the depth of the people that he knows from other forms of motorsports and where to draw on that. And the other thing it says about SVG is he's never afraid to ask a question, not afraid to learn. Even though he's at the top of that game, he's always like a sponge trying to learn from other people.
I was impressed. Cindric on slicks was impressive as well.
So Kyle talked about learning how to run in the rain. Kyle Busch, he's a great example. What he said in his post incident interview is that, a few corners before a heavy braking zone, he drove in there and he's like, hey, I'm giving up too much speed. I know I got more I could get. So he went and got some. So then he tried to apply that down in turn one. And as soon as he went to the brake, around the back of the car went. And that's an example of, unfortunately, learning the hard way. And this is another thing we talked about. These drivers don't have an opportunity to test in the rain. They're learning in conditions that matter, in conditions where there's points, in conditions where they're trying to win it, to advance in a round or win a championship. And the mistakes are right in front of all of us as they learn this. But this is without a doubt the right thing to do, is to run in the rain. And by the way, come into a short track near you, because this is the future. Why should the fans sit and wait for a damp racetrack to dry when we have the technology to get race cars and drivers on the track? We have that technology. Goodyear has shown us we can do it on an oval. These drivers have shown us they can do it on an oval. So get used to it, because this is what the future is. It's the present, but you're going to see more of it, because fans deserve, if it's safe and it's something that can be done reasonably, we should be doing it. And we've seen it. We've seen it at Richmond. We've seen it at Martinsville. It's happening now, but there's more of it coming. There's no doubt in my mind.
So the story of the race for me was lap 65. We got a yellow in the middle of the pit cycle. We saw SVG basically and the 54 split strategies at the end of the stage, and then the 54 was going to run long in the stage. So for those that are newer to road course racing, the goal would be to pit before the yellow comes out. You don't lose a lap. You come get your surface. Then the yellow comes out. Others pit. You cycle to the front. Ty Gibbs was caught. He ended up having to restart about 10th. I thought he was going to be able to charge through the field a little bit. He had a decent enough race car. Now, earlier in the race when that happened, he also had a tire advantage. I don't think I was giving the tire advantage enough weight, because he couldn't really go anywhere. After the race, he talked about overheating his rears just really got stuck. Chase Elliott did drive to the front. He ended up being on the podium in third. So, people could do it, but Ty just could never get the traction going the right direction after getting cycled back on the strategy. I'll add drivers who made the most of this strategy. On the other side, I look at John Hunter Nemechek, Chase Briscoe, Cole Custer, William Byron, all with good runs because they were on the right side of the strategy, right? So I actually don't blame the 54. I think the timing is unfortunate of the yellow. I understand what they were trying to do, run a little bit longer and have fresh tires at the end. I actually am going to give credit to Ty. I think I'm critical about Ty at times, but I was listening to his radio. I thought he would have lost his mind. He was frustrated about the fuel mileage a week ago where he lost at Michigan and was vocal about that. Well, this was a team decision. I'm not going to call it a mistake. The team decision, and the yellow put him behind. It had nothing to do with Ty. He's operating the race that the crew chief is calling. But he just drove, and I didn't work out for him. He lost spots, but he didn't lose his mind on the race. Like, it showed some maturity. We talk about Hocevar maturing. I thought Gibbs on the radio right here, I liked almost what I didn't hear, if that makes sense. I was tuned in because I was like, man, he is going to light this radio up. A few comments, but nothing too bad. He just never could get going. You see why. I mean, look at it, dogging Chastain. I mean, it's so easy to get the rear tires sliding, Jeff, and once you do, you just can't make any hay.
Yeah, this had to be frustrating because, he's sitting there with a chance to win this race and doing a really good job. And by the way, Saturday with a chance to win that race and got caught up. And so extremely frustrating situation, but recognizing the situation, not being in denial, not getting himself wrecked, not wrecking someone else in a very frustrating situation. That is a sign of maturity, because that is going to happen in your career over and over and over, because I promise you lose a lot more than you win. But nonetheless, Ty Gibbs with a very, very strong weekend in regard to speed. Could have finished better, obviously. But this is what we have been waiting for with this team and Ty Gibbs. And they had a lot of bad, and look, this is my opinion. They didn't have the speed that they wanted in many cases, but they also had a lot of bad luck. They had a lot of part failure. They had a lot of things happen to them that have gotten them set back. But you're starting to see consistent speed from this team, and I expect to see that continue. And days like this are the days that you have to grind out. You have to take a bad situation and make it a little better, not worse. And that's what Ty Gibbs and this team did. And that's what you need to see from maturity of a team, a race car driver. That's what ultimately gets you in position to win races. So a disappointing finish, but I still think a strong weekend for Ty Gibbs.
Yeah. I'm going to say this. I looked at it a little bit different, maybe, or kind of the same, where I think we saw a lot of maturity in Ty from not going crazy inside his helmet, not going crazy on the radio, by keeping that composure, by staying on top of that. So we saw a huge leap in the maturity as a driver of Ty Gibbs. What we also saw was he doesn't have the experience to capitalize on that maturity yet, like Chase Elliott did. They're in the same place on the racetrack. Chase has been in that position before. Maturity-wise, he's good in his helmet. Physically, his ability, he knows where he needs to pass, when he needs to pass, when he needs to dog, and when he doesn't need to dog the car in front of him. And Chase methodically worked his way to the front, while Ty got stuck in traffic. And he was just hammer, inside, outside, trying to make something happen, and burnt his stuff up. So we see two drivers who maybe have close to the same maturity or are headed up that ladder, but one of them, the experience of Chase Elliott, propelled him to a third place finish and a podium finish. And the inexperience of being able to race against a Ross Chastain and some of these guys, I think at this point in time in Ty's career, kept him where he was at. I think that's part of the equation.
All right, the big conversation now is going to be the playoffs. SVG is now the 10th winner. We have some more road courses. We have Atlanta. We have some ovals coming that, like McDowell was leading at Texas. Like, there's some drivers that have yet to win on the ovals that I think could win. I guess the question is, who's comfortable and who's in who is feeling good without a win at this point? In my mind, there's two drivers, right? When I look at the points in general, it's a little hard, but if you zoom in a little bit, it's basically I have Chase Elliott and Tyler Reddick that are way above the cut line, 3 digits above the cut line at like 140 and 120 something. I feel great about them. Even Bubba Wallace, who is a chunk above, right? 57 points above in 13th. That scares me, not because of how Bubba's running, but because he's only, maybe less than 20 above Briscoe. And I think we could have, say, 2 or 3 more winners. So I think the fascinating part of this whole playoff conversation we don't talk about enough is the cut line isn't painted on the asphalt. It isn't this hard line. This line moves with winners. So if you look at guys who haven't won, could Chase Briscoe win? I don't think that would shock us. These are guys behind Bubba Wallace. Bowman, road courses, runs well. Busher, we talked about him winning at Watkins Glen last year, right? McDowell ran great at the road course. Dinger ran great at the road course. Kyle Busch, I think it's unfair, even though he's been on a cooler streak lately, to think he can't win. And the list continues to go. Carson, we keep talking about him polarizing because of his mistakes, but he's also polarizing because of his speed. I think he's dangerous. And then going to Atlanta, the list is even longer. I look at Todd Gilliland way down there in 27th. He's a speedway racing machine, right? He could win at a place like Atlanta. So, man, this playoff picture over the summer is fascinating to me, as it is every year, because this cut line keeps moving. So I guess the simple question is, how many more winners, KP? Are we looking at 2, 3, 0? I mean, what do you think?
That's a great question, because I think when you when you look at it, it's fascinating that we've got Denny with 3 and Seabell with 3 and Kyle Larson with 3. I guess, when you look at the amount of already multiple guys who have won multiple races, then I start going back to the other end of it, and I say, okay, the winners in a lot of these races are going to come out of that yellow group right there. They're already there. So all these guys are pretty good. They're just fighting amongst themselves, and it's going to be a dogfight. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you look at that list, like you say, and you can make an argument, and you just went back to 26th or 27th. But if you drop down to 29th, Daniel Suarez, he's won at Atlanta. So a 29th place car in these points can jump up here and win when we get to Atlanta. And some of these road courses, as you mentioned before, when you mentioned Dinger and some of those guys. So, man, it's so hard to tell. I mean, we say it every week. Who's going to show up with speed? Because if you show up with speed, you're 80% there. You're 80% to win in the race if you can show up with speed. You've got to make everything happen on pit road and got to make everything work for you on the racetrack for the last 20%. But, man, we see so many guys that just don't show up with speed. Bowman has been close a couple of times, but they've got to have speed at some point in time. So I don't know how many more winners we're going to have, because I think we're going to have, this is going to be, to me, and I said it earlier and earlier in the year when we started having guys winning 2 or 3 races in a row and winning 3 races and all this stuff. I think it's going to be a year where we have 4 or 5 drivers or 5 or 6 drivers who win 3 races before we get to the playoffs, who have that multiple win. There's nobody that's going to jump out of the pack with 8 or 10 wins, but we're going to have those guys who have 3 or 4 wins apiece. And it's going to be really competitive in that group. So I'm still not convinced we're going to have a lot more winners, but listen, it's cup racing. The potential's there every weekend for a brand new winner.
So I want to, before I say what I'm getting ready to say, I want everybody to know that I completely respect his decision, and I completely respect why Denny Hamlin did not race in Mexico. But that could hurt him. Not running that race could, you said it a minute ago, Steve, 1 point. We've seen 1 point make a difference in people advancing into a round or not. And Denny Hamlin not running that race and not gaining points and could hurt him. Now, maybe it won't, probably it won't, but it might. And when we look at these playoffs and when they get going, we have seen it over and over and over. We have the unbelievable honor to cover the playoff during the hottest time of the year. And in every cutoff race, we're covering the story of a guy maybe running 8th, maybe running 12th. Daniel Suarez at Bristol last year. You remember how poorly they ran, and we were watching them, and they made the next round of the playoffs based on points. So it's going to happen again. And we don't know who it's going to be, but it's going to happen again. And every single point matters. So will Denny Hamlin not run in Mexico? Will that cost him the ability to move into another round? Will 1 point matter? The possibility is there. The reality of it is maybe not, but there you go. Racing Insights. Denny missing Mexico City dropped him from 3rd in regular season points to 5th. That matters. And so will it end up costing them? I don't have any clue. I hope it doesn't, because I hope that a good decision for your family doesn't cost you the ability, right? I hope it doesn't. But the reality of it is that it could.
Yeah. And I like the fact that he has that opportunity. We could talk a lot about the playoffs. We could debate it until the blue face, because it's easy to talk about what's good and what's bad. But he basically stayed home to support his family in the birth of his 3rd child with his fiance. So, A+. Hope mom and baby and family are doing great for the whole Hamlin group. But I do agree. There is definitely a deficit for not being here. That's
a great point. And man, I hadn't thought about it that way, Jeff. But that is a great point, because all you have to do is go back to the guy we were talking about earlier, getting that 1 point for the fastest lap. Wins the most races last year, misses Charlotte because he's at Indy, never turns a lap, and that race come back to haunt him. Missing that one race came back at the end of the season to haunt him and keep him from having a chance at the championship. That's a great point.
Guys, I appreciate the time. I will say this. I didn't know what to expect. I was pleasantly just surprised and here's why. Any sporting event, in my opinion, is about the crowd, the fans. The fans make anything better, whether we're basketball, baseball, racing, or whatever it is. And the facility was amazing. It even has a big feel. That stadium was just an over-the-top feel, and it was unbelievable on Saturday when Suarez won that race. But I will tell you, it grew to Sunday. The ticket sales for Sunday, the place was packed. It was electric. The people here in Mexico City welcomed NASCAR with open arms, and they brought just an electric atmosphere. I was excited to be here. I was happy I was here. It was a fun race, a fun show. And now we get to keep going, right? Regular season continues to march on towards the playoffs. Pocono again this week, another very tricky racetrack where I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss. So I appreciate y'all joining me.
Enjoyed it. It's a good time.
Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks, KP. Well, guys, listen, it's been NASCAR Inside the Race, breaking down Mexico City, NASCAR Inside the Race Live. Continue to look for all NASCAR Inside the Race podcasts. We have some great conversations. Just last week, we had Michael McDowell break down the Mexico City racetrack in front of the race. So as always, rate, review, subscribe. Let us know what you want. Join our Discord community here as well. You see the code on the screen and have a conversation about the races. Appreciate you tuning in on a Monday. Next week, Pocono.